Firstly, thank you very much for inviting us to speak. We're absolutely delighted to be here, and thank you for getting my last spelling and pronunciation right. What I thought we'd do here, there's a lot of research around the recognition of Australian qualifications in China, so this isn't going to be a lecture around that, but really give you an understanding of our experience on how the qualifications that we award and the feedback that we got and the things that we had to do to make some changes. So, just give you a little bit of a visual there about what the college, that is our beautiful college. For those that haven't been there, it's in Manly. It's on a hill overlooking the beautiful Manly Beach. We're a college of about 1,000 students, representing 40 countries. Half of our students are international, 30% are in Asia. But if I give you a little bit of a history, that puts in context some of the learning that we've had when we actually entered into the China education market, if you will. We started off actually in Europe, meaning European students were our initial marketplace. We commenced in vocational routes, so we started off in the hospitality and tourism, professional services, then moved up into sports, events and so forth, and a number of others. But effectively, our ambition was to become, and what we are today, a business college. But what we decided to do along the journey in developing our courses was to keep some of those fundamental elements of the vocational education that we had, that is the practical elements, but also incorporate a lot of the theory and the academic as well. Now, it wasn't easy. We thought it'd be just a blend of subjects and so forth, but that really didn't work. We had to be a little smarter around how we actually implemented and delivered the courses so that it made sense that a student that was enrolling into the college who wanted to get a Bachelor of Business degree had to actually now serve other people in a restaurant because he wanted to major in hospitality. This was a difficult challenge for us. However, we persevered, and there are a number of things that we learned as a process to this. Firstly, that the work-integrated learning experience was absolutely essential as part of that learning and a part of the outcome, meaning this, that in our case, our students will actually go and do 9 months work for someone in the middle of their course. It's a 3-year course. So this isn't an internship. Internships, the student will arrive somewhere, do a bit of work here, there and everywhere, but this is an actual real job that exists in an organisation, whether it's in a hotel, in an events company, in a sports organisation. They come back with that real understanding, real world. Well, by the way, they can get fired, and that has happened too. If they're late, you know, all the consequences of a real job. And that's part of that learning process. And we found that when they come back, they actually have a whole different perspective around their learning. And from there, you know, it's a different way of understanding the material, that is the academic material. So with that sort of model, and we have that right across all of our 6, 7 degrees, we then ventured into China. We've only really been serious in China the last probably 4 years. And we went in there with the mindset of what we had here. So off we went. We went to places like Nanjing, Beijing, all the usual places. Went into the career fairs and did the road shows and all the rest of it. And drank a lot, I was told, some of the recruiters. However, the model kind of worked. It wasn't quite, you know, what their market was looking for. Certainly the work-integrated model was right, but there were some observations and feedback that they gave to us saying, we need some localisation. Now, there was another college, which remained nameless, who actually did try and go in there and implement their model strictly to the way that it was in that country. It happened to be a Swiss organisation, a Swiss college. Now, they failed because they were trying to enforce cultural aspects of Switzerland within the China context, and it just didn't work, although they're rated as probably top 3 in the world. Now, so, let me move on then. So, observations. Firstly, we knew, having walked in there, that there was some skill shortage in particularly the hospitality and tourism, but there are others as well. Events, for example, was also high on the list. Now, the classroom theory and practical work, which I just talked about, and that was something, again, that needed something which we'll classify as being really tailored to the location. The other thing was the whole notion of service. And now this is quite a complex field. You might say, well, you know, how do you teach service? And that's where we started to actually end up, because it wasn't so much just the work experience, which was great, and that put into context a lot of the learning, but this whole notion of service. Okay, so, and that was something that we also had to come back and look at ourselves and say, well, what is this thing called service, and how can we make service global, as opposed to just thinking about it as performing a job or performing a task for somebody else. That's a slide that you have to have in these sort of presentations, otherwise it's not a complete presentation. You need a chart, I was told. They gave me this chart. Look, what this says is that it's an enormous potential for us, but also a great opportunity for us to advance quality of life for both countries in a lot of ways. Education has a very interesting connecting material, I call it, and that is that not only do you talk about the education, but you have to talk about the community. You have to talk about the value that it creates within a community. And that's something that we learned very much in the dealings that we had with Nanjing. And as it so happened, we spent most of our time over the last 4 years in one location, not many locations. And establishing the deep relationships was critical. And there we learned so much about, okay, education is the reason we're talking, but the outcomes are so much more meaningful. Talking a little bit more about sort of the observations. This is a couple of pieces that we found out of the China Daily. And really, what it's saying here is that the work experience was high on the list. So it was justifying the sort of things that we were doing, having to implement that work experience process within that learning experience as well. So we knew that. Plus the requirement for what was being classified then as a Western style education, meaning the English elements and what Western folks, Western businessmen is the language that people were using, were expecting out of hotels and other facilities. So that was in there. But the other thing too that came out was the fact that the community saw value in Chinese students actually moving out and going to another place to learn, that it was valuable there. However, we found that things are starting to change. So while we had students coming over to our college, receiving the education and the work experience and going back home with not only a bachelor degree, but also a resume here in Australia, but we found that when we were talking further, there was another level that at least our relationships in Nanjing were requesting, and that was, can we do this, what you do in Manly, up on that wonderful college, can we do that here? And can we do it in a more condensed form with all the elements that you do? In other words, can you bring some of this IP over here, and can we tailor it so that it has some Chinese cultural elements to it? And that is the sort of thing that we've started to work on. And colleagues who just come back from China sort of putting the final touches on being able to actually do that. But we have some barriers within our own country, unfortunately, to try and get this more active. The first one is that a lot of private providers like ourselves that actually came from vocational routes are not included in the picture in terms of the recognition as other public universities do. And this is actually constraining for us. So everything we have to do based on our own investments. There's really little support from anybody else. So I flag this because it is an issue. We represent a large portion, private providers represent a large proportion of education, higher education, and I do think that this is something that needs to be addressed and put on the agenda. And in fact, we are talking to folks in Canberra about this. So really, it needs a collaborative effort here home for us to exploit further the sort of model that I talked about that our Chinese friends and partners are saying that we want to do and want to do more of. So TEXA is the education organisation, which is a regulatory body, obviously the Ministry of Education and so forth. I won't go through too much of those, only to say that we learned that you have to listen, you have to be respectful around the requirements of the local requirements, There has to be a trust factor, which means that you've got to make an investment. And there was a wonderful meeting that I had late last year where what came out of that was that, you know, we shouldn't be making money from each other. We should actually be making progress and money with each other. And I thought that was an extraordinarily meaningful, short statement, but profoundly true. So thank you very much.